All right. So thank you everyone for attending our TA call. Again, it's on navigating conflict and difficult conversations. My name is Mimi Phillips, and I'm the Youth Training Coordinator here at Families Together in New York State. I am a formerly credentialed youth peer advocate with lived experience navigating the mental health system, and I am currently credentialed as a family peer advocate with experiencing navigating systems as a caregiver. I am joined by Kezia and Emma, who are also Families Together staff. Would you guys like to introduce yourselves?
Hi, good morning, everyone. I'm Kezia Clayton. I'm the Youth Workforce Development Coordinator here at Families Together.
And hi, I am Emma Adler, and I am the other Youth Workforce Development Coordinator at Families Together.
Alrighty, we're very happy to have you all here. So we are going to start as usual with an icebreaker. As you guys introduce yourself, please include your name, your pronouns, your agency, your role, so whether or not you're a youth peer advocate or if you're just supporting, the county that you work in, if you know that. And our icebreaker for today is a hot dog a sandwich? I have to be very honest. I think it depends on your definition of a sandwich, but I would say a hot dog is a sandwich. There is a meat or something, a filling in between bread. And I grew up in Massachusetts, and like our hot dog buns kind of come apart and they are kind of two separate pieces of bread. So I'll argue that. And I'll let you guys come off of mute and feel free to introduce yourselves.
I'll go first. Hello, can you guys hear me? My name's Madeline Brown. I work in Albany County. I just was hired as the YSS program manager for LaSalle Institute here in Albany. We're just starting the YSS program here in the fall. So I'm a week into the role, so learning the role and the job, and then also um, this agency and just meeting everyone here, just trying to understand where I fit in and how I fit in with my skill set and background, and then how to best implement this program in this area. So yeah, I'm formally I was at the Y for a few years. I was my background's in sports management, so I did facility operations at a couple different places, and then yeah, so I'm very passionate that a hot dog is a sandwich as well. So I did work in Massachusetts for a brief stint in Pittsfield. So not brief, it was 2 years, but I worked for the city of Pittsfield doing recreation, special event stuff. So um, a hot dog is a sandwich, yeah.
Thanks for sharing.
Yep.
I see Jay, you introduced yourself in the chat. Welcome back. It's nice to have you. Jay is a former Families Together staff, so it's always nice when we get to see familiar faces. Jay is a statewide advocacy specialist at OMH, a credentialed YPA, and believes that a hot dog is not a sandwich. It's okay. I feel like that's the point of this conversation. Anyone else want to introduce yourself? Feel free to come off of mute or pop it in the chat.
Yeah, I guess I'll go next. How we doing, everybody? My name's Vernon Young. I'm a statewide youth peer specialist here at OMH for the Office of Advocacy and Peer Support Services. Um, let's see, I live and work in Albany County. Is a hot dog a sandwich? Uh, I'm gonna have to go with no. I feel like a hot dog is a hot dog without bread, but to each their own. I respect it. And yeah, and I also went to LaSalle Institute, Madeline. Just to let you know, so I'm a former student.
Awesome. Thank you.
That's cool. Thanks for introducing yourself. And honestly, the point of this icebreaker is that we all have differing opinions. And I feel like that it definitely is dependent on who you are and what you consider to be a sandwich. So thank you for your opinion and for introducing yourself, Vernon. Nice to have you. I see we have Emma, Sophia, and Tiana. Would any of you like to come off of mute and introduce yourself?
Hi, I'm Tiana Adler, Youth Peer Specialist with the Office of Mental Health and in the Office of Advocacy and Peer Support Services. My pronouns are she, her. My role, oh, I already said that. I work in Albany County, and a hot dog is not a sandwich.
I
It,
like the emphasis on the not.
it just can't be. And I just apologize because I just have to turn my camera off so I can eat a little bit. Just,
Absolutely. No problem. Thank you for nourishing your body and listening to that. By chance, is it a hot dog?
it's not a hot dog.
I just had to ask. Alrighty, we've got Sophia. Would you like to go next?
Yeah, I'm Sophia, she, her. I'm with OMH and I'm a youth peer specialist in Albany. And I think that technically it is a sandwich when it is in a bun, but spiritually that is not true.
I like it. You're like spiritually, my body just says it's not true. We can appreciate that. And Miss Emma, would you like to, Emma Pratt, let me forget we have two Emmas in the room. Would you like to introduce yourself? You can come off of mute or pop it in the chat.
Sure. Hi, I'm Emma. She, her. I'm a youth peer advocate and youth specialist with Independent Living of the Genesee region. I cover Genesee, Orleans, and Wyoming County, and I do believe hot dogs are a sandwich for sure.
All right, so we have some differing opinions in here, but that's plenty okay. All right, thank you guys so much for introducing yourself. I hope that we will all enjoy this learning environment together. All right, so moving on to our learning objectives today. So since we're talking about conflict, I think the first thing that we start with is reframing conflict. So what is conflict and how can we reframe it in our work as youth peer advocates? We're also going to talk about some communication tools for difficult conversations, and then the difference between advocacy versus empowerment and how we can use that in our role as YPAs when we are dealing with conflict. So, just a quick reflection here. What is one word that you associate with conflict? And you guys can feel free to come off of mute or pop it in the chat. I can start. One of the words that I associate with conflict is often difficult.
I would say confrontation or anger.
Confrontation or anger, disagreements, intimidating or yeah, tension, overwhelming, hard. Yeah,
Loud.
I think loud. Ooh, that's a good one. Frustrating. Yes, I think that conflict is one of those things that like you either think about like feelings and emotions that it brings up or just what it deals with. So we also have confrontation as well. Yeah. Thank you guys for sharing those words. I think it's important to know where we're starting when we're thinking about conflict and then where we're going. So now we're going to focus on reframing conflict. So I always wanted to start with saying that conflict is an inevitable part of life. And I think we've all realized this in whatever way, shape, or form. But our perspective on it can make all the difference. So I want to explore how we can reframe conflict in a more positive light. So first, it's important to recognize that conflict is in fact normal. It's a part of our everyday interactions, and it isn't something that we should necessarily avoid, even though it makes us uncomfortable. Here at Families Together, we often talk about our comfort zones and getting out of our comfort zones into those stretch zones, and I think that conflict is one of those things that inevitably makes us stretch as humans. So instead, I believe that we could all view conflict as an opportunity for growth. So when we face conflict, it challenges us to understand different perspectives and to develop new skills. Conflict often reveals our underlying needs and values, as well as the underlying values and needs of others. And this insight helps us to identify what truly matters to us and to those that are around us. It's also important to note that conflict itself isn't the problem. It's typically how we choose to navigate the conflict that determines the outcome and how we feel after. So I think that by approaching conflict with an open mind and a willingness to engage constructively, we can transform conflict into a powerful tool for personal and collective development. So what is the youth peer advocate role in conflict? As YPAs, our role is not to fix or take over. We always have to remember that we are not the decision makers or the voice of the youth. So we often talk about putting the youth in the driver's seat or in the captain's chair, whichever vehicle you feel like commandeering that day. So in our roles as YPAs, we are supporters of the youth voice. And we do this by amplifying the voice of those that we work with, supporting their self-advocacy, helping the youth build skills, modeling communication skills, and being the bridge for them across systems. But it's really important that we know we are not the ones that should be making those decisions, and we shouldn't be speaking for our youth. It's important to know what is it that our youth wants, and then help them to be able to express that for themselves. So here's another group discussion question. What makes conflict harder when you're supporting a youth versus if you're handling conflict yourself? So when you're more in that role of a YPA, what do you think might make navigating conflict more difficult? For me, I think when I'm navigating conflict for myself, I really just have to think about calming myself down, and getting my point across. But when I'm navigating for a youth, there's typically a little bit more in play where I'm really thinking more about the environment, other people's opinions, how they may be affected, and how my youth typically likes to handle things on their own. Anyone else? You guys can come off of mute or pop it in the chat. It's unpredictable. Yeah. It's a little bit different when you're navigating with other people versus if you're just navigating for yourself. Thinking about the effects after what they say. Yes. So it's definitely different when you can think about, like, well, if I say this in my life, this is how things are typically going to work out. But when you're working with the youth, you're like, I can see this going very many different ways. And I want to try to keep as much possibly like control over the situation so that it doesn't go in a way that we don't want it to. Ooh, not having all of the background info. That's really key. Yeah. It's
I would
important to know our youth might come in with other things going on, and so we may not have all the info. Yeah, Emma.
I would say also maybe like staying neutral, especially if it's a youth, you have a very strong rapport with, and maybe like really want to support and be helpful, but also trying to maybe keep an open mind for both parties.
Yeah. Along that same line, like not coming off as like too aggressive or too I guess demeaning in certain situations, or not demeaning, but like forceful. You don't want to seem like you're, unless it's like a dangerous situation, obviously, but coming off as like the old person in the room, like trying to be like, no, we have to do it this way, just coming off like how you're perceived, I guess.
Yeah. People's perception of us, especially I think when Emma was saying trying to remain neutral, like you're trying to play
Right.
Switzerland. But does
Yeah.
everyone see you as Switzerland, or do they see you as that like advisor in the group that like you kind of have the bigger voice, you have the bigger agency or the power?
Right.
I see Tiana, you also said, do as I say, not as I do, especially if you don't follow your own advice. That's a good one, especially as a youth peer advocate. Like sometimes as a youth peer advocate, we're telling others like, you should really speak in this way, or you should really do this skill. And we may really struggle with doing that ourselves or not be in that place in our recovery journey yet. And yes, Kezia, there's a lot of external factors that are outside of your control. I think that exists in both places, but it's especially hard when we're navigating with our youth, too. Thank you guys for your input. If you'd like to add anything else, feel free to pop it in the chat. So let's try to understand what's under the conflict. And I like to do this by using kind of that iceberg analogy. So on the surface, we have words and behaviors. So these are the visible parts of the conflict, like the tip of the iceberg. However, beneath the surface lies the true drivers of conflict. So what those feelings are, those needs, power dynamics, and those past experiences. So it's really important that we recognize that when youth express conflict, or even adults in our lives express conflict, that they might be communicating deeper emotions and unmet needs. They might be navigating complex power dynamics or reacting to past experiences. And by addressing these underlying factors, we can help youth find more constructive ways to resolve their conflicts. Another way that we can look at this is positions versus interests, which is something that we cover in our advanced 4-day training. So, as we are supporting young people to speak up for themselves, this includes supporting them to collaborate with others. And successful collaboration is built on the understanding of the differences between positions and interests. So, positions is what I want. It's the stance that people in agencies or decision makers take, but it typically provides little insight as to what the motivation is behind the what I want. For interest, it's why I want it. It explains the values, the motives, and the reasons for a position. True resolution comes from understanding a person's reasons for why they want it and what they want. And knowing why can offer many options where both parties' needs can be met, versus the one solution approach, which sometimes limits people and also leaves at least one person in the group feeling unhappy. So when we talk about position going to interest, we can kind of use these three steps, as it's important to understand everyone's interest to reach a solution that could work for everyone. So always remember that your role as a youth peer advocate is not to be the negotiator for the young person, but to teach the young person skills so that they feel empowered to speak up. You can still use your skills to encourage discussion that facilitates understanding so that a resolution can be reached. So we like to break this down into three steps. The first one is seeking the why. This invites conversation for individuals to explore the reasons why they want something. Next, we're going to listen and engage in sincere dialogue, which respects the sharing process and demonstrates openness. This helps us to consider solutions around everyone's interest instead of positions, and the best consensus is happen when people's needs are being met. And lastly, we're going to ask for solutions around the interest instead of the positions. So when we can focus on what it is that we want, we can then shift our thinking. So solutions that focus on position-based thinking typically fuels conflict, but the solutions that are based on interest or needs tend to diffuse conflict. So we always want to focus on what is it that our youth needs, as well as what is it that other people might need. As a youth peer advocate, we often work in service teams. So we're working with different people. We might be working with a provider who needs the youth to engage and to show up in a way that actually makes it beneficial for the youth to take part in that programming. But the youth might need to work with a provider that allows them to feel seen, to feel heard, that maybe even looks more like them or can understand their cultural background. And so when we can compromise and make sure that both of those needs are met, we can make sure that our provider has a youth that is willing to engage and that that youth is willing to engage with that provider because they found that level of respect. Okay, so let's practice. Where's my text? There we go. A youth refuses to attend a meeting and they say they don't listen anyway. So, from you guys, what's happening on the surface? What are we seeing in the words and the behavior? And then, as well as what might be underneath? What might be this youth's feelings or the needs, maybe the power dynamics or their past experiences that they're navigating? And of course, this is one of those things where I only gave you one sentence, so you can really draw from your experience or from anything else. So, what do you guys think? What are we seeing on the surface?
Distrust.
Yeah, distrust. I think that's a little bit of like what might be underneath. That distrust probably comes from their past experiences as a youth, since they're kind of saying like they don't listen anyway. So they have past experiences where they're like,
Yeah,
yeah,
what's the point?
yeah, but what's the point? This is just going to be the same old thing again in a different circumstance. Yeah, so on the surface, we're seeing a reluctance to engage.
Yeah.
Absolutely. And then what else might be underneath? Underneath, they want to be heard. Exactly. So when a youth says a sentence like, they don't listen anyway, this is typically a common sentiment that arises when people feel dismissed. And so it's clear that this youth somewhere in there is like, I want to be heard, but whatever I do, however I do it, just typically doesn't yield positive results. So they definitely have that need to be heard underneath there. Anything else that you can think of too? What do we think the power dynamics might be? Yeah, I was going to ask for power dynamics. Hopelessness, yes, absolutely. And so for power dynamics, it seems like the youth feels like they don't hold the power in this situation. So whoever is leading this meeting or whoever's in charge of this meeting holds the power. So they feel hopeless, yes, invalidated. Thank you guys.
Maybe
So,
even,
yeah,
oh, sorry, I was just gonna add like a lack of autonomy.
Yes, a lack of autonomy. They don't have that decision-making power here. So I think it's really important to note that sometimes this is what disengagement looks like for us. This is what we hear from our youth. But it's important that we ask ourselves, what feelings and needs might be driving this behavior that I'm seeing? What is driving their reluctance to come to these meetings? And how can I get them to better engage? You have to think, could it be the feelings of frustration, a need for respect, or perhaps a past experience where they feel undervalued? And remember that it's essential to consider the power dynamics at play. Who holds the power in these meetings, and how might this influence the youth's feelings of being unheard? I always feel like when you can start thinking on those deeper levels, especially as a youth peer advocate, you can start asking and navigating better questions to ask your youth. What is it that you need, and how can I better assist you in making sure that you can be an active participant in this meeting? And it also just moves us towards more effective dialogue. So, a key skill that we can focus on is curiosity. So, this is crucial when we're engaging in dialogue, but especially challenging ones and conflict. So, first, it's important to ask rather than assume. By posing questions, we can open up the conversation and invite the other party to share their perspectives, which can lead to a deeper understanding. So, in our last activity, we only had like 2 sentences. And so, a lot of what we drew from was assumptions. But the truth is, if we were working with the youth in person, we'd want to ask them questions. How are you feeling? Are there any past experiences that might be affecting how you're showing up? I noticed that you're feeling disengaged or that you don't want to engage in this. What's contributing to that lack of you wanting to engage? You could ask them straight up, are you feeling like you're not being heard? How can I make sure that your voice is heard at these meetings? How can we conduct these meetings in a way that allows you as a youth to feel like your voice matters and like you have agency in this matter? And so I always want to bring that up. It's like in these exercises, a lot of the times we can draw from our outside assumptions, but when we're working with youth, we really want to be curious and ask them and not assume. The next thing we want to do is listen for meaning. So this goes beyond the words that they're trying to say and actually trying to grasp those underlying feelings and intentions. Because we're youth peer advocates, we all have that experience of navigating systems on our own behalf or navigating systems that serve children and kind of having those feelings for ourselves. So it's typically easy for us to empathize, but we really want to listen for the meaning behind why that youth doesn't want to do things. And remember that our experience, while it does give us some insight as to how another youth might be feeling, doesn't just apply to everyone, and there's not one size fits all solution for this. So we really do want to ask and navigate this in a way that's personalized for every youth that we're working with. And lastly, we should validate feelings. Acknowledging and affirming someone's emotions can really help to build trust and rapport. It doesn't mean that you have to agree with their feelings, but recognizing that they're right to feel the way that they do can really honor their experience as they're going through this. And by incorporating curiosity into our interactions, we can create spaces that feel more honest and meaningful, which paves the way for constructive dialogue. So let's also talk about some more communication tools for difficult conversations. So when we're talking about listening, we're also talking about different types of active listening. So active listening is a critical skill in any conversation, but especially when we're addressing sensitive topics. So here we're going to highlight 3 essential components of active listening. I promise you there are far more, but for today I'm only going to go over these 3. So we have reflecting. So reflecting means mirroring back what you've heard, which is going to help show the speaker that you're engaged and attentive. Paraphrasing takes this step of reflection just a step further by rephrasing their words. Instead of parroting back to them word by word what they said, we're going to use the rephrase. So we are going to change the words just to make sure that we ensure that we understand the message accurately. This allows them to also be able to give us some more information. And I always say that when you use paraphrasing, to try to use it with an open-ended question. So if I'm going to paraphrase what a youth says, if they come to me and they say, taking tests is silly, I never pass my exams, I can say to them, it sounds like you're not having the results that you want when you're studying. Am I hearing you correctly? I'm paraphrasing what they're saying to me, not using the exact word by word, but it gives them an opportunity to give me even more information about how they might be feeling and make sure that I truly understand where they're coming from. And then again, going back to validation. So this is the acknowledging the other person's feelings and making them feel heard and respected. For example, saying something like, "It sounds like you're feeling unheard," can powerfully affirm their emotions. A lot of times youth don't understand that other people might really get what they're going through, that we might be able to see and validate that experience of feeling unheard. And even just placing a word on it might help them to actually be able to understand what emotions they're actually going through. Perhaps they're feeling frustrated, they're feeling dejected, they're sad, they don't want to participate, but they really don't know why. So even when you try to place something on there with validation, it allows them to choose. Like if I say, "It sounds like you're feeling unheard," they might be like, "No, I feel like they hear me. I feel like other people are always still going to make the decision. Like they tell me that they hear me, they repeat it back, but they still make decisions that go against what I asked for." And so we can really start to listen to them and validate those concerns. So these are just a few techniques that are foundational to active listening, which helps us to facilitate a deeper connection and understanding in our conversations with youth. So going back to the point that Emma made earlier about staying neutral, sometimes we have to use neutral language in order to do that. So this means avoiding taking sides or assigning blame, which can escalate tensions in the room. So instead of focusing on, you know, the blaming language or pointing the finger, we can focus on using balanced and non judgmental language. So, this approach helps to create an inclusive and respectful dialogue. One practical way to implement this is to suggest a pause to gain clarity on all viewpoints. So, you might say, "Let's slow this down and understand both perspectives." This invites cooperation and ensures that each party can feel acknowledged. By maintaining neutrality, you foster an environment where constructive communication can thrive, which also allows for more productive and empathetic exchange. So it is important to note that sometimes as a youth peer advocate, we might be navigating difficult conversations, whether that's with a youth and their parent, a youth and their service provider. And so it is important that we stay neutral and ensure that both parties can understand each other. Yes, we're here to, capitalize on the youth voice and to support them to speak up. And we're really here to support the youth, but sometimes that means being able to take that neutral stance so that both parties can understand each other, and then you can always take that time to affirm your youth later and use that affirming language when you're more one-on-one. But if I was in front of a service provider and a youth and they seem to be having a difficult conversation, I'd want them both to stop, pause, reflect, and take a step back, and then just say, "Let's understand both perspectives." Have one person speak and then have the other person speak, and maybe use those techniques of active listening, paraphrasing back what the other person might be saying to ensure your youth understands it, paraphrasing what the youth might be saying back to your provider to say, "It seems like what they're trying to communicate to you is this. Do you understand that? Or is there something we could do there?" So you can try to guide the conversation that way while still remaining neutral. Another strategy that we can use is open-ended questions. So when we talk about open-ended questions, of course, we have to quickly mention closed questions. So closed questions are anything that's going to lead to like a yes or no or a very specific answer. So if I ask you, "What day of the week is it?" Everyone in this room would say Thursday, if we all remember that it's Thursday. If I say, "Do you like pizza?" That's typically a yes or a no question. So I'm looking for a specific answer. Open-ended questions are going to encourage deeper responses and foster meaningful conversation because they don't typically have a prescribed answer to them. So these are a few examples of open-ended questions. What do you want them to understand? This question opens up the floor for our youth to express their key messages and their priorities. How would you like this to go? This invites our youth to share their vision or their preferred outcome, which can help us align our approach to their expectations. What feels most important to you right now? This encourages our youth to focus on their primary concerns, which can be particularly helpful in conversations that feel overwhelming. That way, we can recenter the conversation and kind of really focus on what is most important to you, or at least make sure that that's kind of the golden thread that flows through everything. So, by using these questions, we show that we're not only interested in their perspective, but also it gives us more information on how we could guide the conversation towards clarity and mutual understanding. So, this really helps to inform how we're going to move forward as a youth peer advocate. Before I continue, does anyone have any questions, comments, or concerns? I always forget to tell you this, but you guys are more than welcome to come off of mute, add things to the conversation, or put things in the chat. Like this does not have to be just me speaking at you or to you. It definitely can be a more dynamic conversation. So I'll pause for a second. Does anyone have anything they want to add or ask? All right. Well, if you do, please feel free to come off of mute or to add it in the chat. Another skill that we can use is reframing. So this kind of takes us back to that iceberg or the positions versus needs. So we want to shift from those positions back to those needs and interests. We want to shift from conflict to shared goals. So often we can find ourselves in specific positions, focusing on what we want rather than the understanding the underlying needs that are driving these positions. So when we focus on shifting, we can actually uncover what the common ground is. So what is necessary for us to resolve this disagreement? Similarly, if we move from conflict to finding our shared goals, this allows everyone involved to see each other as a partner in a shared endeavor rather than adversaries. So instead of us all being enemies that all want different things, we can really say, okay, we are all here to support this youth. So how do we come together to make sure that this shared goal is met? So a simple statement that I like to use when this is going on is just saying like, you both want to feel heard. I think it's really important sometimes that people understand like you want to feel heard and you want to feel heard. Like everyone wants their voice to be heard. How can we center this on a common goal? And once we can identify that common goal, it typically makes the situation a lot easier to navigate because instead of our point being, I just want you to listen to me and I will do anything to get you to listen to me, it becomes, I really want to work towards this shared goal with you. This is how I can do that, and this is how you can do that, and this is where we can meet each other in the middle. Another thing that can be very helpful, especially as youth peer advocates, when you get caught up in the moment, is to pause and regulate. So I always say, I have to be really honest, I do not like navigating conflict. My lived experience of navigating conflict has not always, had the most positive results for myself and in my life. And so for me, it can be very hard being a youth peer advocate, navigating conflict with my youth, being, in the midst of a youth and a parent that's having a difficult agreement, or even amongst a treatment team that doesn't seem to be in agreement. And so for me and for other youth peer advocates, I think it's really important that you remember to pause and regulate yourself. So this can mean a couple of things. First, noticing escalation early can definitely prevent situations from spiraling out of control. So I always say I like to pay attention to both the verbal and the nonverbal cues that might indicate rising tension. So sometimes you can literally see tension building up in someone's body. Sorry. So that can look like people are starting to ball up their fist. Sometimes the color changes, and so you start to get more flushed. Breathing increases. You can hear the way that they're speaking, and the pacing in their voice kind of speeds up or gets louder. The tone of voice shifts and changes. And so all of those are kind of sign that like tension might be building and that perhaps we need to work on trying to pause and regulate. One of the ways that I like to do this is by modeling a calm presence. So grounding myself in my breath and my bodily awareness is really crucial during this step. Taking a deep breath and centering yourself can help you to stay calm and focused in a moment, even when you're dealing with conflict. And not only does this benefit you, but it also sets an example for others. It's also important to name what's happening in the moment. So by acknowledging the emotions and tensions present, you validate the experience for yourself and for others. I think sometimes when conflict starts to arise, we're afraid to say that the conflict is starting to arise until it reaches a point of escalation that we can no longer ignore. And I think that it's okay in certain meetings and things like that to say, hey, it seems like things are getting a little tense here. Can we just take a moment to just pause and reset and just remember that we're all here, and then reiterate once again, what that shared goal is. That can kind of try to de-escalate things in the moment, but we will talk about de-escalation later as well. And I also like to give permission to pause. So sometimes that means taking a moment to step back, and that's all that's needed to reset and approach the conversation with renewed clarity. And thank you, Jay. I definitely think that these are skills that are really crucial, whether it's for yourself or for your youth. And I like to say, like, I model these for myself, but I also like to teach them to my youth because this is where they're able to advocate for themselves. I think that youth being able to stop a conversation and saying in their IEP meeting when they're meeting with staff, like, It seems like we're all getting a little tense here, and I'd like to take a moment to reset. This is my IEP meeting, and I want to make sure that I'm getting the best help as possible. And I know you're all here to help me, so can we just recenter on that goal instead of, attacking each other or whatever emotions might be going on? And I also think that this supports the youth regulation. And as YPAs, we also need to know in the moment that we do need to support our youth to regulate their emotions and their efforts as well. So I always encourage my youth to use techniques like deep breathing or taking a break when needed. If it's possible, can we just take a 5 minute pause? Can we just go outside, take a walk? I think that'll really help us, and then we can come back to this conversation. It gives everyone in the room just a second to debrief, to just take a deep breath. Getting your youth out of the environment might really help them to just take a deep breath, calm themselves down, be able to recenter. And it's also important to know what your youth needs. So I tend to have this conversation with my youth prior to going into meetings and knowing what is it that you need. So when conflict arises, when you're facing really big emotions, and working on those coping skills ahead of time, but also being aware enough to see my youth is trying all of their coping strategies right now, and they're not in a safe environment where they can do that. They're not feeling safe, and this is going to continue to escalate. So my due diligence as a YPA is now to safely get my youth out of that situation, even if it's for just 5 minutes, to take a walk to recenter themselves, so I can remind them it's okay for you to de-escalate. It's okay for you to regulate yourself, and then we can go back to this meeting. Alrighty. So the next section that we're going to talk about is advocacy versus empowerment. So when we talk about youth voice, what does youth voice really look like? So this is really exploring how young people can authentically express themselves. And it's about giving youth the space and encouragement to communicate their needs and perspectives. So one of the key elements of this is expressing their needs clearly. So it's important that young people can feel comfortable sharing their perspectives, but in doing so, they'll need to learn to set boundaries and to actively participate in decisions that affect them. So one of the things that I always talk about too is like whether you're a family peer advocate or youth peer advocate, sometimes we have to recognize that like a youth being upset and screaming what they want may also be a part of the youth voice. I like to tell people like they don't need to be right to be heard. And what I mean by right is behaviorally right. Sometimes we're like, I expect you to be able to talk in this very calm tone. If my youth has a lot of feelings of frustration, it might come across that way in their tone. That doesn't mean that I can't hear what they're saying and leave the tone. And so sometimes I try to remind people of that too. Like I can hear what they're saying because they're expressing their needs clearly, and I can leave everything else. Can I work on that behavior with my youth after? Absolutely. We can reflect. We can definitely touch base and say, well, what could I have done differently? And we can work on building that as a skill. But if they're expressing their needs clearly, even if it's not in the right tone or the most professional way, we should still be listening to them. It also includes them sharing their perspectives. So by sharing their perspective, it might not be the commonly understood thing that everyone in the room gets, but that's okay. Their perspective is their perspective, and everyone is entitled to their own perspectives. Sometimes we need to shift our perspectives. So if they can at least tell me what their perspective is, I can help them in understanding, well, I don't think that this person actually meant any harm. I don't think that they meant these things. Let's break this down so that they can better understand. This also means asking questions. Sometimes people get really upset when our youth ask questions. They might feel like it's intrusive or like somehow this goes against the agency that someone has, but it's natural to be curious. And sometimes asking those questions can be seen as almost going against authority. If youth can ask questions, they can better understand what is being set forth for them. They can be more included in their different conversations and what's affecting them. This also means that they'll need to learn how to set boundaries. So what is important to us might not be so important for our youth. Our youth may not be someone who's like, I can't tolerate when someone screams at me, and if you scream at me, I'm going to leave. That's important to know. So we have to remind people on our treatment team, they may need to adjust their tone because our youth is going to set that boundary for themselves. But it very much means participating in decisions. I always like to say the youth voice doesn't have to be perfect or polished. It just needs to be theirs. And it's our job as youth peer advocates to help them make sure that that voice is heard. And then, of course, to help them build those additional skills so that they can be heard. I oftentimes have to remind my youth, I know what you were trying to get across, but I don't think that the adults around you can hear you and truthfully understand you when you're screaming at them and using profanity. I know that you're upset, and I'm going to validate that you're frustrated. But there's also a way that we have to go about expressing ourselves so that people can understand us and that they can listen to us. So let's also dive into some reasons why youth might struggle to use their voice. So first, there might be a fear of consequences. Many young people worry about the potential backlash or negative outcomes if they speak up. And this could include being for their parents and speaking up against their parents, their teachers, authority figures in their lives, even sometimes with us. Sometimes the youth really have a fear of consequences. Like, what if I tell my youth peer advocate that that doesn't work for me? What if I tell my service provider that I don't want to be on medication and I want to pursue a different line of recovery for myself? And so sometimes there's that fear of consequences. Then we also have to consider the past experiences. If our youth previously have felt ignored or dismissed, they're less likely to want to express themselves again. And this history can be a significant barrier, which is why as youth peer advocates, we really want to focus on building that rapport, that trust with them. We want to focus on sharing our lived experience in a way where they can understand that we've been in their shoes before, maybe not in those exact shoes, but we've been in a situation where we can understand feeling unheard, where we can empathize with them, where we know how frustrating it is to navigate system. And we can use that past experience that we've had and that they've had to find some common ground and make sure that they know we're going to capitalize on your voice being heard. There's also the reality of power imbalances. So youth can often find themselves in situations where they feel like their opinions are less valued compared to adults or authority figures. And I think this starts at a very young age. You're a kid and you tell your mom no, and they're like, you're going to do it anyway. I don't want to go to school today. You're going to go to school today. And it doesn't really matter what it is that you want because the adults around you say that they're acting with your best interest in mind. And so it's really important that our youth know that, even though there are some power imbalances, we're going to capitalize on them having as much power and agency as we can. So reminding them that they do have a right to be present in those meetings, like their IEP and 504 meetings, that they have a right to be present when a treatment team is coming up with a treatment plan, that they have a right to say what they want to be in their treatment team, that they also have a right to say who's on their treatment team and to say, no, I do not want to see this provider. And that is a right that they have. It doesn't matter how old they are. That is literally a human right for them. And that can actually help to make sure that that power imbalance is lessened. The next one would be not knowing what to say. So not knowing what to say can definitely be a hurdle. And sometimes youth might lack, the confidence or the words to articulate what their thoughts are. So I always find that it's really useful as a youth peer advocate to work with them on that. So when we go into this meeting and I can let them know who's going to be at this meeting, what are the decisions that are going to be made during this meeting, I can ask them like, what do you want to say? What do you want the adults in the room to understand? And then we can role play. We can help them build those skills so that they're more confident and being able to say what it is. Sometimes I find that youth work really well with notes. So I've had some of my youth come into meetings with note cards so they know exactly what words they want to use in that moment rather than feeling shy because they're like, I'm in front of authority figures and I don't know what to say. They can formulate those words beforehand. And I also ask them, like, if you're not able to say this, how would you like me to support you? Like, would you like me to step in and to say those words for you? And I'll read word for word and let them know, like, this is what my youth wrote down and prepared before this meeting because this is what they wanted you to understand. Or do you just need me to kind of adjust the room so that way I can get them to stop and pause and give you the space and agency to speak for yourself? And lastly, emotional overwhelms. So it's really important that we understand that the intensity of emotions can make it difficult for you to communicate effectively. I always remind people youth have just as big emotions as adults. They just typically have less coping skills on how to deal with them and typically less words to articulate exactly how they're feeling. And so when you're emotionally overwhelmed as an adult, we find that it's hard to communicate. It makes sense that our youth also find it hard to communicate. So sometimes, again, being able to recenter ourselves, being able to help our youth recenter themselves can help them to know that, they can find a better way and that we can also help them and support them in using their voice. So this really brings us to being a YPA and being a coach. And so instead of saying it for them, we should help them prepare to say it. So first, we can talk about practicing. So it's crucial in helping young people feel comfortable and confident in expressing themselves. By practicing, they can refine their thoughts and gain the courage to speak up. Encouragement plays a significant role here. We need to be their cheerleaders. We celebrate the small victories with them, and we help to build their self-esteem. I really, really, really enjoy affirming my youth for speaking up, especially in times that they didn't see that they did it. Letting them know, like, hey, you did a really good job advocating for yourself during this meeting because you said this. And sometimes that really highlights and encourages them to say, oh, I didn't realize that I did that in that moment, but it helps build their confidence so that they're willing to do it again. Breaking down things into smaller steps or smaller words is also another key strategy. When we're working with treatment teams, sometimes they are using medical language that, like, I'm going to be honest, even as a grown adult, I can't spell, I can't. Like, I can't write it down and understand it, and neither can our youth. So sometimes I have to remind service providers, can we use layman's terms? Can we speak about this in a way that the youth understands? Can we use youth guided and youth focused language so that they can understand it? I'm not saying that we shouldn't use, the official words for whatever this diagnosis is or whatever this treatment is, but we do need to be able to explain it in a way that the youth has informed consent and that they know what exactly you're asking of them. So by simplifying things into manageable parts, we can help youth to articulate their feelings and opinions more effectively, and also to gain a better understanding of what's going on in the world around them so that they can better make decisions. And finally, our role as a YPA is not to give them a voice. Every youth already has one. We are just here to amplify the voice that they already possess. We are coaches, so we should be guiding them to navigate their own paths and make their voices heard. This approach not only builds their confidence, but also empowers them to engage more actively in the decision-making processes. I always like to remind people that being a youth peer advocate is temporary. And I don't mean that in our field of like work, but working with your youth is temporary. We're not going to be here forever to hold their hands. So it's really important that we're working with them to build those skills so that they know I can speak up for myself. I have agency. I have authority. I can do this research for myself. I can navigate these resources for myself. I might need help in this, but helping them to build those coping strategies, helping them to be able to navigate systems, helping them to be able to advocate for themselves and to ask other people, hey, can you break that down in a way that I can understand? Teaching them that language that they can use gives them the autonomy to be able to help themselves. And that's at the end of the day what we want. We want the youth to be self-sufficient and to be able to do things for themselves. So what are some practical coaching tools that we can use? We've talked about these a little bit, but I'm just going to go over 4. So one, helping them clarify what they want to say. So this can be honing in on the key messages that they want to convey and ensuring that it aligns with their thoughts and feelings. And I always say that this part is important. Some youth will say, I feel this way and I think this way, but what they say is not that. And it conflicts. And so sometimes it's really up to us to help them say, you know what, I think what you're trying to say, but that's not what I'm hearing from you. So helping them just understand that the way that they are, relating to us or the way that they are conveying something to us might not be the way that adults around them are hearing the situation, and helping them to really refine what those words are or find the right words so they can articulate their thoughts and feelings. Also, identifying the goal. When we're working with youth, we are really trying to work with them on goals and objectives, and they should be the ones that can identify these goals and what they want to work on. So it's really important that we help them understand what it is that they hope to achieve from our conversations and our work with them so that we can understand, is it that they want to resolve an emotion? Is it that they want to resolve a conflict? Do they want to express an emotion? Do they want to gain an understanding? Do they want a certain decision to be made? And that way we can help direct them in identifying that goal and then working towards that. We also want to help them practice their words. So we can do this through rehearsing, and that just helps youth to gain their confidence, refine their message, and prepare for the actual conversation. And I always tell people you can coach them for every situation, and I promise you a new one will come up in the moment. And that is always a learning opportunity for youth to let them know, hey, we can prepare for everything, but humans are just humans and we never know what to expect. And so I'm so glad that we prepared for this person to say yes and for this person to say no. And now they've completely changed the plan on us. So let's take a moment to recollect ourselves and refocus and do all those things again. But we can practice that with them. And also planning for different responses. Kezia says, I also encourage you to practice their advocacy with me, whether that be changing their goal or not going to a service. Yes, sometimes practicing that rejection of something, like, I do not want this. And knowing that like someone might say it in different ways is really important. Or letting them know, like, I want to change my goal. That really goes into the next point that I have here, which is planning for different responses, which allows them to consider potential reactions from others, as well as different reactions that they might feel for themselves. So this makes them more equipped to handle the various outcomes while also maintaining control and poise. So these tools are designed to not only support youth in their immediate communication challenges, but also to build lifelong skills in expressing themselves effectively. So, quick question. Does anyone use any of these practical coaching tools in their work, or have any examples of how you could use it in your work?
I guess I can kind of like expand on what I put in the chat as well. Sometimes like I know that I'm their youth prayer advocate, and so we have that connection, but I tell them that it's okay for them to disagree with what I'm saying, or if they do not like what I'm providing for them, or if they don't want to go to a service, or they feel like they're being pushed too far, that it's okay to even start with me, because they are more comfortable with me, and then hopefully they'll build that callus or that skill on being able to do it outside of me.
I like that idea. I think that you're absolutely right. Youth tend to feel more comfortable with us. And so they also might feel more comfortable being able to push those limits with us, being able to approach those different things. And yeah, it does start with them being able to say no to the people that they're very familiar with and comfortable with, and then move up into those stretch zones again, those people that they might feel a little bit uncomfortable with pushing back against. I think that also evens out the like power dynamic. You're letting them know you guys have the power here as the youth. I do not have the power as your youth peer advocate. So feel free to tell me no so that I know how I can better serve you because you are again in the driver's seat. Thanks for sharing. Anyone else want to share before we move on? All right. So moving on to some sentence starters for youth. So these are sentence starters that you can use with young people in conversations where they might feel uncertain or overwhelmed. So first we have the phrase I feel blank when blank. This helps them to articulate their emotions in specific situations, which can encourage openness and honesty. They can also use what I want you to understand is, which empowers them to communicate the key points and ensure that their message is heard. They can try asking, can we try and insert a new solution here? This opens the door for collaboration and finding a mutual solution together. This fosters a sense of partnership and mutual respect and also shifts the power back into the youth's hands where they're able to say, can we try this? And then get permission from someone else. And lastly, I'm not comfortable with blank, which is crucial for setting boundaries and expressing their discomfort, which is a vital skill in maintaining healthy relationships. So these are just some sentence starters that you can use with use with your youth as they gain confidence in their ability to communicate effectively. I also wanted to break down coaching into like 3 steps. So there's kind of the pre-conversation coaching tool. So pre-conversation, it's really important that we set the stage for productive dialogue. So this starts by asking youth reflective questions to guide their thoughts and intention. So at first, what do you want them to understand? So what's your core message that you want the individuals or the adults or your service providers to understand when we go into this meeting? What feels most important to you? So, what is the priority? That way, we can help them prioritize their thoughts and they can lead to a clear conversation. And then we can ask them, how do you want this conversation to go? This helps them to visualize what the positive outcome might be, and we can set a constructive tone. So we can let them know, like, it may not go that way. So let's plan for some alternatives. Let's plan for some coping skills. How would that make you feel if they say no? That way we can plan ahead and just have a more constructive conversation. And lastly, what support do you want from me? This lets them know that we're offering our assistance and that they're not alone and they can rely on us as YPAs for guidance. So these are really foundational in preparing youth for meaningful conversations. In the moment, especially during conflict, we can assist our youth with first emphasizing the importance of pausing and checking in. So this step is crucial because it allows both parties to take a moment to breathe and gather their thoughts, and it sets a tone of mindfulness and presence. We can also gently prompt our youth to express themselves. So I like to sometimes stop the conversation and just say, like, is there anything else that you wanted to say here? Especially when I can tell that my youth is building up and wants to say something. They just don't feel like there's a time or a moment for them. So we can gently prompt them, or sometimes when we're going through coaching, like Casey was talking about, like, and we're practicing that advocacy, I might actually tell them, like, these are kind of like key words. And so we kind of have like key words that my youth knows, like, when I say that, this is your chance to step in and say something else. And so we can practice those kind of coach statements as well. So I like to use open-ended questions to encourage our youth to share more about their feelings and perspectives, which prompts them to think deeper and creates an opportunity for mutual understanding. Again, we can reflect back what we hear. So showing the youth that we are actively listening and validating their experiences, but also reiterating that to others so that others can better understand them. And that can be really reassuring for our youth during a conflict. And finally, asking them, do you want to say more about that? This question is really an invitation for them to continue the conversation at their own pace and provides a safe space for expression. And then after the conversation, we always want to help our youth reflect. So I like to start with 3 questions. What went well? What felt hard? And what would you do differently next time? So this really just allows our youth to, one, point out the positives, and we like to be strength-based. So I always like them to point out the positives of what went well during this conversation, and then I can affirm their strengths. What felt hard typically lets us know what are the challenges and what are things that we could continue to work on, and then what would you do differently next time? Sometimes my youth is like, I would do nothing differently. And I'm like, okay, I'm going to have to coach you through what we could do differently this time. But it really opens up conversation for, again, gaining skills and being able to improve every interaction and conversation as we move forward. So let's practice. A youth wants to tell their provider that they feel judged but nervous. So how would we coach this youth beforehand? How could we work on skills with them before they have to have this meeting with their provider?
I feel like my initial reaction is to explore how come they feel judged. What is happening in the moment that is giving them that feeling?
Yeah. If they can really focus on like refining what are my thoughts around feeling judged, then they can maybe point out specific instances that have already occurred in the treatment where they're like, when you did this, this made me feel this way, or this made me feel judged. And they can really bring that up. Yeah. Any other ways that we could coach them beforehand?
Me, I love practicing dialogue, so maybe giving them some pointers or starters on how to communicate that to how they're feeling.
Yeah, maybe some role play to really practice that dialogue. And I like to say, like, coaching them beforehand is also letting them know, like, what if your provider responds this way? What if your provider responds this way? What if your provider responds this way? Like, it might be the thing that you want, the thing that you don't want, something in the middle, so they can really figure out what they're feeling there. Ask what they would want to say if they weren't nervous and then build their confidence. Ooh, I really like that. So really changing that feeling that they're coming out of with this. And so what could you do if you weren't nervous about this? If you were just talking to someone and you felt confident? Yes. I like that. So what questions would we ask? Yep, that definitely answers that one. Are there any other questions that we might ask them? Ooh, remind them of the times that they did this before. So affirming the different ways that they've already done this, or in other situations, how they've already done this. Yes, that would definitely help coach them, but also build that confidence. And then what support could we offer during the conversation? So when they're having this difficult conversation with their provider, what's some additional support we could offer?
Maybe like reaffirming everything that they're saying, or making sure that you're providing space for them to actually use their voice.
Yeah, providing space for them to use their voice. Absolutely. I think one of the ways that I would also offer support is by like letting them take the lead. So by saying, before we start this meeting, I think our youth has something that they might want to that they might want to explain, and then having them really start with the service provider. But that way, it allows them to lead the meeting rather than the other way around, where like the service provider is leading the meeting, and then they're like, I do not feel like I have a space or agency to step up in this moment. Awesome. Thanks for your input, guys. Alrighty, so why is this important? Why does this matter? So the very important thing is that we really want to focus on being mindful of overstepping when we're supporting our youth. When we're overstepping, this can significantly reduce a person's confidence. That means that we might impose our own ideas or solutions, and this can make our youth feel incapable or less capable of making their own decisions. We also don't want to silence the youth voice. Young people need to feel heard and respected, and when we overshadow their thoughts with our own, it can discourage them from expressing themselves openly in the future. And lastly, we don't want to undermine trust. So overstepping can really undermine that trust that we've already built, and that can really ruin the supportive relationship that we've built as youth peer advocates with our youth. So trust is built when youth feel like their opinions and feelings are valued, and we don't want to damage that. So really, this is about balancing guidance with the respect for the youth's autonomy, and recognizing the impact of overstepping really helps us to empower rather than inadvertently hinder those that we aim to support. So I always really think about like, am I giving them the space to do this? Or am I stepping in too soon or too early or just taking over? But it is also important to know when to step in. So consider when to step in these three primary scenarios in mind. So if the safety is at risk, this means that there's any potential harm to the youth or others. In that case, your intervention is necessary and immediate. Please step in as a youth peer advocate. Second, I would always say be ready to act if you notice that any rights are being violated. So this is about ensuring that the youth's legal and personal rights are being respected and upheld. And this is an important aspect of advocacy and protection. Always feel free to refer back to the youth if they know which one of their rights is being violated. But if they're not aware, it's important that you bring that to the center of the conversation and let other people know that by letting a youth say, no, I don't want that person on my treatment team, and then keeping them on the treatment team, that you're violating that youth's rights. They have authority and autonomy over who's on their treatment team. And lastly, step in when the youth explicitly ask for support. So this is a clear indicator that they trust you and that they're seeking your guidance. And it's vital that we listen carefully and respond appropriately to their needs in that moment. So this brings us to our key skill of stepping up and stepping back. So I like to ask these questions for myself. So is this the youth's voice or mine? This reflection helps to ensure that the youth's perspectives are not being stepped on, and that their needs take precedence over my own as a YPAs. I like to also ask myself, did I ask what they want? If I didn't ask what my youth wants, I'm typically acting on my own accord, and I'm not sure if I'm doing something that the youth would be upset about, and then I typically have to ask after. So asking beforehand really makes sure that whatever my actions are aligned with the youth's needs and desires. And lastly, am I creating space or am I filling it? I want to make sure that I'm always creating space for my youth to express themselves, and that I'm not unintentionally filling it with my own input. And that includes with sharing my lived experience. That includes with, stepping up in a meeting, or, proposing a certain treatment option for them, or even the activity that we're doing. So I always want to make sure that I'm encouraging autonomy and fostering a supportive environment where youth can thrive and feel heard. I always want to make sure that people also understand that stepping back doesn't mean stepping away. It just means that you're prioritizing the youth's voice while being ready to step up when necessary. So don't start ignoring them when you step back. Just simply step back and allow them to take the leadership role. And then as always, this wouldn't be about conflict if we didn't go over de-escalation skills. So de-escalation skills are crucial in managing situations effectively and in ensuring a positive outcome. So we're just going to explore some key techniques to keep in mind. So we've already kind of gone over staying calm and grounded. But this not only helps us to maintain control of the situation, but also sets a positive tone for everyone involved. The second one is to slow the conversation down. So this can give everyone a chance to think clearly and prevents emotions from escalating any further. We can also name the emotions. So by acknowledging how someone feels, we can validate their experience, which can instantly diffuse tension. And sometimes this really starts to point out when people unintentionally made someone feel something. So a service provider may not notice that they, made a youth feel rejected or unheard. And so being able to name that emotion, say, it sounds like you're feeling unheard, that might make that service provider realize, ooh, the way that I'm speaking to them is really making them feel that way, and that's not my intention. So let me change my wording, let me change my behaviors, let me change my actions so that the youth actually feels heard, and they might be able to self-correct and adjust themselves. And always, always, always refocus on the goals. Remember that the aim is not to win the argument, although sometimes it feels like it is. We're not trying to win the argument. We want to find a way forward that is beneficial to all parties involved. So in situations like this, rather than acting impulsively or reacting, we want to strive to respond with intention. So this is a thoughtful approach that can make all the difference in resolving conflicts effectively. So, going a little bit deeper into de escalation skills, let's think about what we can say in the moment. So, these are just a few statements that you can say, like, let's pause this conversation for now. I think we need additional support to move forward. I want to make sure this is handled in the best possible way, or let's reconnect with support so we can continue safely. These are all statements that you can say in the moment that allow you to indicate that you recognize the need for more resources or expertise. So maybe you need your supervisor for additional support. Maybe you need to consult someone on a legal matter for additional support. But this really allows you to ensure that the situation is being handled in the best possible way. This can also reassure the other party that you want to reconnect with support. And so they know that if you're taking this moment to pause the conversation, you're not just stepping away and avoiding it, but you want to come back to this in a way that makes sure that you and the youth are better prepared to move forward. So I always like to say too, like, for this really helps us to protect the youth, ourselves, and the integrity of our work. And then what do we do if conflict continues to escalate? So it's really important to note that not all conflict can and should be handled by you as a youth peer advocate, and that is okay. As youth peer advocates, you are not responsible for resolving every situation. And sometimes escalation can be a sign of a system issue, not an individual skill issue. So recognizing when to seek help is a crucial part of maintaining a safe and supportive environment for both yourself and your youth. It's important to know your limits and to understand that asking for assistance is a strength, not a weakness. When you feel a situation is beyond your capacity, reaching out to your team or a supervisor ensures that the youth receives the care and guidance that they need. And we should always remember that collaboration and communication are key in fostering a positive and constructive atmosphere. So first, prioritize your safety and that of the youth. If you're in a physically unsafe situation, please make sure that you get you and your youth out safely. Stay within your role as a YPA. It's important to note we are not crisis workers, we are not doctors, we are not physicians, we are not able to diagnose. So if there's a conflict that's escalating, we're also not police officers. We are not behavioral therapists. We are not here to deal with very severe crisis level moments, and that's okay. Stay within your role as a YPA and find support. That can really mean calling your supervisor in the moment while you're with a youth. It might mean calling whatever authorities that you need to get the assistance that you need. But do not attempt to manage it alone. Pause or step away if needed and if it's safe to do so. I always say, when I say if it's safe to do so, I mean if your youth is going to be left alone in a physically or emotionally unsafe situation, you shouldn't leave them alone. So use your diligence, use your cognitive ability to figure out if it is appropriate for you to pause and step away if possible and if needed. And as always, involve support when appropriate. And so again, refer back to your supervisor, authorities, following crisis plans, safety plans, and all of those things that are within your role as a YPA. And then after escalation happens, please be sure to check in with the youth. Make sure that your youth is okay. Check in with them, make sure that they're emotionally safe, that they're physically safe, get feedback from them on anything else that has happened, make sure that they're following through on whatever additional steps needed to be taken. Debrief with your supervisor in a one-on-one so that way you can get your support. As a youth peer advocate, perhaps there's something that you could have done differently or done better. Perhaps there's a resource that you're not available, that wasn't previously available to you or you're not knowledgeable of that that your supervisor can help you navigate. I always like to personally reflect on what happened as well. Yes, I use that opportunity with my supervisor to reflect, but I like to personally reflect on what happened and how that might change. Document it appropriately. So if you do have to call, 911, if you do have to reach out to crisis services, if you do talk to your supervisor about a situation, make sure that you're documenting that and you're putting that in your notes. And last but not least, take care of yourself. Make sure that you're enacting self-care. Thanks, Maddie. Have a great day.
Thank you.
Make
You
sure that
too.
Thanks. Make sure that you're taking care of yourself. So, whatever your self care plan looks like, and we have a TA call on the 5 steps of self care. If you want to watch that, whatever your kind of burnout prevention plan is, confiding in a friend, making sure that you're not, sharing that HIPAA compliant information, confiding in your therapist, finding ways to calm yourself down, whether that's, deep breathing exercises, yoga, meditation, exercise, whatever kind of works for you and your plan. Make sure that you're taking care of yourself mentally, physically, emotionally, and all those things are taken care of. And if you need help with that, always refer to like your employee assistance programs as well. So your EAP, reach out to your supervisor for additional one-on-one support. And if for whatever reason your supervisor is not helpful in this situation, reach out to someone else within your agency that can provide that additional support for you. And then also remember, there's no harm or shame in you also navigating crisis resources or additional resources for yourself. So just make sure that you're doing all the steps to take care of yourself because you can't pour from an empty cup. And if you're not okay as a YPA after conflict, you're not going to be able to better service your youth. And then just going over once again when to loop in that support. If your safety feels at risk, so emotional or physical, the conflict becomes aggressive or unsafe, the youth rights are compromised, you feel overwhelmed or unsure, or the situation exceeds your role. These are all steps where you can loop in support, and that support can look very differently. So just figure out for yourself what that level of support is, and make sure that you are doing that. So we have one last practice one. So a meeting becomes tense between a youth and a caregiver. What could escalate this and what could de-escalate this meeting?
I think doing nothing can escalate it, just letting it progress as it goes on. That could definitely be one.
Yeah, I think that's the one that we don't bring up often is the do nothing. You're like, if I do nothing, I didn't cause any harm. But sometimes doing nothing is exactly what causes that escalation.
Mm.
Yes, thank you. Anything else that could escalate the situation? Taking sides, yeah. So if you take the youth side or the caregiver side, someone feels attacked, and then instead of like a one versus one person sort of opinion, it becomes like a two-person versus one person. Definitely could escalate the situation. I often talk about the fact that like tone and language escalates conversations. So like sometimes people don't realize it, but like the use of profanity can really escalate a situation. People take things differently, but the tone of your voice could lead to disrespect on both ends of the spectrum. That could definitely escalate the situation. And what might we do? What could we do to de-escalate the situation?
Like we talked about before, just step out, take a break, re-go over things with your youth, maybe pull to the caregiver to the side. Just remember we have that common goal and just try and figure it out.
Yeah, you listed a ton of things. We could recenter, refocus, pause, reflect, shift that position versus interest, shift back to the common goal. Absolutely, that's a lot of different things we could do to de-escalate the situation in the moment. Anyone else have anything else they want to add that could help de-escalate the situation? I'll just say we could do the opposite of what Tiana said, and instead of taking sides, remain neutral. So, like reminding both sides, like we both just want to be heard and trying to kind of reframe the situation, have both sides kind of rephrase what it is that they want, reflect back and forth to each other, and kind of play Switzerland, find that compromise in the middle, and really assist with the conversation, but make sure that each one of them is using their voice. Thank you for that. All right, so to summarize, we focused on how to navigate conflict and youth-centered support. So when we're talking about this, the first thing that we really want to bring is an awareness, which means being attuned to the emotions and the needs of the youth. This is about understanding the dynamics at play and recognizing the signs that may indicate rising tensions. We want to focus on communication, which involves listening actively and speaking empathetically. It's not just about exchanging words, but truly connecting and understanding perspectives. And this really leads to effective communication. Also, we're really talking about balance here. So we really, as YPAs, have to maintain an equilibrium between advocating for these needs and respecting the boundaries of others involved. And balance just ensures that all parties feel heard and valued. And last but not least, we always want to make sure that this is youth-centered support. And so we want to put the youth in the driver's seat, and conflict navigation is really bringing all of these together to work on those skills. So, our key takeaways here is that we can prepare our youth for conflict, support them in the moment, and reflect after conflict. So, just to recap, conflict is natural. It's a natural part of any relationship, especially between youth and caregivers, youth and treatment teams, youth and ourselves. And it's important to remember that these situations are opportunities for growth and learning. The key takeaway here is to always stay youth centered. Our role as YPAs is to support the youth in finding their own solutions, not to replace their decision-making process. And this empowerment is crucial for their development. Another important part is that the real growth often occurs through challenges. So when we navigate conflicts effectively, we can provide a supportive environment where our youth can learn and grow. And then we also just want to reflect on how these principles can be applied in our own interactions. Consider how can you maintain the balance between offering support and allowing the youth to face and overcome challenges on their own. Remember that as a YPA, our goal isn't to resolve the conflict for youth, but it's to build their abilities to navigate conflict themselves. With that being said, does anyone have any questions, comments, anything to add?
I just want to say that it's been super helpful. This workshop definitely. I can take things for myself personally that can help me with just conflict in the future and understand it's not a bad thing. It's just a part of life, and it's something that like we all have to deal with, and it can be a positive thing out of it. So thank you for the workshop and everything. Honestly,
You're very welcome. I'm glad that I could help you reframe. And I always say that too, like, yes, all of our TA calls are always like marketed towards youth peer advocates and our work as youth. I like to take a lot of these skills and work on them for myself because
exactly.
like
Yeah, yeah,
I could use some assistance navigating conflict. And I think someone said it really well earlier, like, do what I say, not as I do, especially when I don't follow my own advice.
yeah.
Thank you for that. Anyone else have any questions or comments before I start running through our wrap-up slides here? Alrighty, so the first thing that I will say is that we always want your input. And so we do have a survey that I am typing into the chat here. We would love your input. This definitely helps us take a look at what it is that YPAs or others that are in the room need in terms of their professional development and training and adapt towards that. Here at Families Together, we always want to make sure that we are, again, using your voice. So we want your feedback to know what it is that you want to see in these trainings. So if you would please fill out the Survey Monkey link that I just popped in the chat, we would greatly appreciate it. And you can feel free to open that and review it as I'm going through the next few things. I'll just be going over our upcoming events. So for our upcoming events, our next TA training will be on July 16th at 11 a.m. and we will be talking about building bridges, so engagement strategies for YPAs. So we often talk about engaging youth that are reluctant, resistant, or disconnected from services can be one of the most challenging aspects of our work as a YPA, but it's also one of the most impactful is getting our disengaged youth to engage in systems. So we are going to be talking about how to do that and exploring different engagement strategies through the thoughtful use of texting, community-based outreach, and non-traditional connection points. And so if you're interested in that, please register for our next TA training, which is on July 16th. If you ladies could pop these in the chat, I have the How Do I Find My Voice training. But we do have a youth powered Discord. We always urge that all youth join this. It is a youth only space that we have here at Families Together where youth can network. We talk about advocacy. We talk about different events that are going on in our communities, and how we can better engage with each other. It is a great room where you're talking about doing forums on Discord and other activities. And I always say, if you don't want to join our Discord, that's okay. Please share it with the youth that you're working with so that they know that they also have a safe space where youth are interested in advocacy, systems change, and doing different things in their communities. And so we welcome you to join our Discord. We also have a virtual training coming up from Youth Power on how do I find my voice. And so this is designed for youth and young adults that are ages 12 to 25. And if you don't want to attend, once again, the youth around you can attend this as well. Or if you're a YPA, you can attend this with your youth so that they can figure out different ways to share their voice. So as we talked a lot about navigating conflicts, we really talked about how we can make sure that the youth voice is at the forefront of that. This takes it a step further as we're talking about self-advocacy, self-expression, how fear and self-doubt might affect us, and how we can make action plans to negate that, as well as self-empowerment and self-growth. So that's going to be on June 25th, and it's going to run from 5 to 7 p.m. It is on Zoom, and so if you scan that QR code, you can join that training. So I hope that you will engage with us there. We also have a survey that is going on. Well, it's a questionnaire on people's experiences that are people's experiences accessing mental health and substance use disorder through Medicaid managed care. And so if you are a parent, if you're a youth, or if you're a service provider, you can answer this questionnaire. We also ask that you send it to any parents, youth, or service providers that you know in the New York State area who have been enrolled in Medicaid managed care or attempted to access mental health or substance use disorder services. If you want further information on this, you can also get in touch with Brad Hansen at Families Together. And I put his email in there. I'm missing the G. Hold on. There you go. You can also reach out to Brad for further information. We also have our job fair coming up, and so we do have a call for organizations and participants. So if you work for an organization, or if you are a credentialed YPA or FPA, you are interested in joining our July job fair, we currently have a call out for organizations and for participants. You can register there, and I also just shared our 2 additional flyers for that in the chat. As always, we have our Youth Peer Advocate events. So just to run through them really quickly, we do have our Lived Experience Cafe, which is a space directly for youth peer advocates to come talk about the youth peer advocate position, what's going well, what's not going well, and receive support directly from youth peer advocates from around the state. I love this meeting. It is a lunchtime meeting, and it is quite the kiki. We love to talk. We love to offer each other support, and it's really a good place to also network and make sure that you're getting the support that you need, whether that's from your supervisor or having some difficult conversations, so your peers can really assist you with that. We also have our youth peers meeting, which is a meeting that we allow for youth 12 to 30 to come to. And so this, you do not have to be a credentialed youth peer advocate. So if you are just a youth who's interested in coming, you're more than welcome to come to our youth peer meeting, or you're welcome to share it with youth peers that want to come to our meeting. And again, we talk about advocacy, networking, kind of the same thing that we do on Discord, but in person. So that's pretty fun. And then of course we have our monthly TA training. So if you liked this one, we have them every month, and we will be meeting again in July. Kezia also shared our Supervisor Experience Cafe, so we're always here to also support supervisors. And so if you are interested in having your supervisor come, please share that flyer with them. Or if you supervise YPAs yourself, please feel free to continue to come to those. They are every other month, so our next one for the YPA supervisors will be in August. And last but not least, we have our flyer for the Youth Peer Advocate Credential Advisory Committee. This is a space for credentialed youth peer advocates to have a paid position and be a leader in our community. And so we do ask, if you are a credentialed youth peer advocate and you're interested in applying to join the committee, you can scan the QR form to see our interest form. That is also on page 2 of our YPA events May through December handout that I just popped in the chat, the last one. So you can also find it there. With that being said, I always want to thank you. Your presence and input are truly valued, and we always look forward to connecting with you again soon. As trainers, we will continue to be here in the room, so if you have any additional questions, comments, or concerns, we'll be here to answer them. And with that, have a wonderful Thursday.